Okay, let's try a little thought experiment. Picture this. You're sitting on a park bench. It's a perfect evening. The man next to you is blind, and he asks you to describe the scene. You say something like, "The sky's a beautiful orange, and the clouds, well, they look like cotton." And he stops you. He asks, "What is orange?"
How do you even begin to answer that? It's a fascinating puzzle, isn't it? You're both human, you're both in the same park, experiencing the same world. But how do you bridge that fundamental gap in perception?
So you might try saying, well, orange is a warm color, like the feeling of a fire, but he just shakes his head. To me, he says, an orange is a fruit I can hold, and it's not warm, so what are you talking about? And just like that, you realize his entire universe, his whole reality, is built without this one piece of sensory information. You're using the same word, but you're describing two completely different worlds.
And that's the real kicker here. It shows us that reality is subjective. The world we just assume is solid and the same for everyone is actually being filtered through our own unique senses. And this exact same puzzle, it applies to the biggest concepts we can think of, space and time.
Now, this is not a new idea. Oh no. For centuries, philosophers and scientists have been locked in this huge debate about what space and time really are. And this whole debate boils down to two main camps: absolutism versus relationalism.
So what's the difference? Well, absolutism says that space and time are like a fixed, unchanging stage. The stage is there whether there are any actors on it or not. It just exists. But relationalism, it argues the exact opposite. It says there is no stage. Space and time don't exist by themselves. They are created by the actors, by the relationships and interactions between all the objects in the universe.
And that brings us to the million-dollar question. Which one is it? Is our reality a fixed container that we're all just living inside? Or is it something that we're actively helping to create? To figure that out, we've got to look at the clues left behind by some of history's greatest minds.
Yeah, this wasn't something they figured out overnight. You can think of it like an epic intellectual relay race, where the baton of understanding was passed from one brilliant thinker to the next over hundreds and hundreds of years.
So it all really kicks off in the 1600s with guys like Descartes and, of course, Isaac Newton. They were firmly in the absolute camp. Space and time were a rigid, unchanging container. But then you had thinkers like Leibniz who argued, no, space and time are relative. They're created by the things in them. For a long, long time, Newton's idea of a fixed stage was the winner. Until Einstein. His theory of relativity showed that space-time can stretch and bend. It was a huge win for the relational view. But, and this is a big but, it came with a catch. The mystery wasn't totally solved, and we were kind of back where we started. So the puzzle was still there. Is space real or not? And this is where things get, well, really weird. A radical, totally mind-bending new idea enters the ring. It's called emergence theory.
Get ready for this, because emergence theory proposes something absolutely wild. It suggests that space and time, they're not the fundamental building blocks of the universe at all. Nope, they are what's called an emergent property, something that just arises from a much deeper, more fundamental level of reality that's made of nothing but pure information.
The theory suggests that our entire three-dimensional universe, everything we see and touch, is just a projection, kind of like a shadow on a wall. But this shadow is being cast by a geometric object that exists in 8 dimensions, an 8D crystal.
Okay, so how on earth does that work? Well, it starts with this 8D crystal, which is basically pure code. This code projects a 3D pattern, like a mosaic made of tiny geometric building blocks. But here's the crazy part. This projection isn't just our reality. It's the code for every possible reality that could ever exist, all at once, in a state of pure potential. So what flips the switch? What turns all that potential into the single, solid world we experience? Well, that brings us to the final, most crucial step, a choice made by a conscious observer.
And this right here is where the theory goes from being just mind-bending to something truly profound. It suggests that consciousness isn't just some random byproduct of the universe. It's a key ingredient in its creation. So let's really think about that. If you have this ocean of infinite potential realities all existing as pure information, what is the mechanism? What's the force that's powerful enough to reach in, pick just one, and make it real? According to emergence theory, the answer is us. It's consciousness. The universe of pure potential just stays that way, potential, until a conscious mind observes it. The very act of looking, of measuring, of experiencing anything, that is what forces one possibility out of that infinite sea of choices to snap into place and become our physical reality.
Now, I know what you might be thinking. This sounds like pure philosophy, maybe a little sci-fi, right? But hang on, because the core idea here, that observation affects reality, is backed up by some seriously hard science. And in 2022, the scientists who pioneered this research got the biggest prize in the game.
That's right. The Nobel Prize in Physics was awarded for experiments that proved the bizarre reality of quantum entanglement. See, in the quantum world, tiny particles exist in what's called a superposition. That's just a fancy way of saying they're in all possible states at the same time. They don't have a real position until you look. The moment a conscious observer measures them, that cloud of possibilities collapses and the particle is forced to choose a single state. This is actual experimental proof that at the most fundamental level, observation doesn't just see reality, it creates it.
So, let's pull all these threads together. After all of that, where does this leave us in that huge, centuries-old debate? Well, the evidence from quantum physics, these new emerging theories, it all seems to be pointing in one very clear direction. The reality we experience isn't the fixed absolute stage that Newton imagined. It is profoundly relational. It actually depends on the observer.
And that, right there, is the ultimate takeaway. We are not just passive passengers, just watching a pre-written cosmic movie. Our consciousness is an active participant. In a very real sense, we are co-creators of the universe we are observing. Your mind helps to shape your reality, just like in that thought experiment back at the park.
But this leads to one final, absolutely staggering question. If the act of observation is what turns possibility into reality, if the universe requires a witness to actually become real, then who or what was watching at the very beginning? Thanks for watching.